Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Mexican Crossing Lines. Share this out. We're streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Twitch at a Mexican Crossing Lines, YouTube at Duke 1517, and on Facebook at 88.1 Fargo Moorhead. We're also on the air at 88.1 KPPP LP, where we're adding local color to your airwaves.
Welcome, everyone. You can also find us on social media on Twitter at media_PPP. You can also email me at cindy@kpppfm.com or duke@kpppfm.com. You can also leave us a message on our message line, 3 minutes long, 701-566-0917. We are always welcoming your topics, ideas, and comments here on a Mexican Crossing Lines. Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. And welcome to our program tonight about friends in low places. I'm your host, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And I'm Duke Gomez-Schempp.
And you're listening to 88.1 FM KPPP LP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. I hope that you have been following along with the shows that I've been doing lately. I've been focusing a lot on the Select Committee's work, but specifically on the January 6th defendants and all of the people investigated by the January 6th Select Committee and all of the court proceedings going through, including the Supreme Court hearing Trump's case, which they denied on executive privilege. 8-1. The only dissenting justice was Clarence Thomas. And all of the ongoing requests, subpoenas for people to appear. Yesterday, I brought you all the way up to the president's family and lawyers surrounding the president, former president, Donald J. Trump. And today, I'm going to go down that line. But first, I want to do some housekeeping and remind you of where some of the folks came from. A lot of what we have seen so far in terms of prosecution of people involved with the January 6th insurrection / coup attempt are people that have been charged with minor charges, trespassing, parading. There have been some that have been charged with assault on officers. There have been some that have been charged with carrying weapons, theft, damage of property, all sorts of other things. Obstruction of justice, obstruction of a federal government function. And now there have been seditious conspiracy charges against the militias, Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers, and 11 others. So I've been showing you what the connections are between the people that were in the White House, the people that planned the January 6th events, and the people that are in the militias, because that's important. Because I want you to remember that there was a lot of militias involved in the January 6th coup. And going all the way back to when we first started seeing these militias pop up, I noticed that they were coming to protests of police shootings of Black and brown people. That's where they were showing up. That's where I remember in 2016, they were showing up at all these different protests and either claiming that they're protecting the protesters, who are mostly people of color, Black, or claiming that they're there to arm the protesters so that they have the right to open carry and protect themselves from presumably vigilantes and law enforcement that would inflict some other kind of damage on them. One of those was Sam Andrews in Missouri. Remember, Ferguson, Missouri was one of those first places that we saw a lot of protesting in. And Sam Andrews, in this 2015 article, shows up in Ferguson. And he is protesting alongside the people of Black Lives Matter. And in this article, you'll see that he says the Oath Keepers are going to arm the Black protesters in Ferguson with AR-15s. So that was kind of crazy. But here he is in 2021 talking about the Oath Keepers and their role in the January 6th insurrection. Same guy that we saw way back in 2015, but here he is in this update by reporter Kelly Wheel? I don't know. Anyway, this is what he had to say. If you look at the headline there, he's talking about how the Oath Keepers... I guess we don't have that.
Nope.
But Sam Andrews in 2021 was asked about the Oath Keepers' involvement. And he basically said, yeah, he had called for rifles to go to the Capitol, okay, originally. He had called for people to bring weapons to the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. And he became very scared about the FBI investigating all of these in militias.
Yeah.
Because a bunch of his comrades in arms in militias got arrested. So all of a sudden, boop, he switched. He started singing a different tune. In the weeks ahead of the Capitol insurrection, he had been saying things like, quote, contact your friends with rifles. This was in mid-December, right before the insurrection. In a podcast, on a right-wing podcast, he said, and tell them to join you. That's who you contact. And then you get a map and you drive to D.C. That's what he was saying back then. Since then, he is rescinded since 12, all these people died and all these people have been investigated and arrested in militias. He told the Daily Beast that going to D.C. with weapons to protest would be like, quote unquote, standing in a field with your best friend over a cow patty and stabbing each other for who gets to keep the cow patty.
Really?
That's how much he changed. And he actually ended that quote with, it's a lot of bloodshed for a little poop, except he didn't say poop.
I gotcha.
Okay? So these are people that were, dyed in the wool militant extremists. They have been very active, as you see, for many years. 2015 is how many years ago? Jeez.
7.
It feels like a decade ago. And yet they took a wild, some of them are taking a wild turn in terms of backpedaling and trying to get out from under the FBI, the DOJ, and the 1-6 committee's spotlight right now.
I'm sure.
But we saw that the people that were associated with militias, including the Bundys that went all the way back to Standing Rock and before, when they held their standoff, it was something that when it first emerged, people were kind of like, who are these people? Are they villains? Are they
spies?
Are they heroes defending themselves against the government? Well, I wanted to show you that on one of the Dakota Access Pipeline pages, way back in the day, people that were supporting Standing Rock, which didn't start until 2016, posted this picture of the Bundy family's ranch from 16 years prior. And you can see in the comments that people were talking about what kind of a family this was. There's a mention of Joseph Smith, who's one of the leaders of the Mormons, because a lot of the Bundy's ideology comes from Mormon teachings, and I don't have time to get into that now, but I will later. And if you scroll up, one of the other comments there talks about welfare. Let me tell you what I know about the welfare rancher. They call Cliven Bundy the welfare rancher. So even as the Dakota Access Pipeline was posting images. And remember, I told you the Bundys went to Standing Rock. You saw them there, Duke, right?
Yep, I sure
The
did.
Bundy people were there. There was a lot of controversy around it. One of the many people that wrote books about what happened at Standing Rock, talked about the Bundys in their foreword and in their summary of the book, Standoff, by Jacqueline Keeler.
Oh, yeah.
This was published back in the time of Standing Rock, and you can see that the title is Standoff, Standing Rock, The Bundy Movement, and the American Story of Occupation, Sovereignty, and the Fight for Sacred Lands. And you'll see that they start off by describing that the Bundys' takeover of the Oregon's Malheur Wildlife Refuge and Standing Rock Sioux Tribe standoff against the oil pipeline in North Dakota are two sides of the same story. They're wildly different stories, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's interesting that Jacqueline Keeler wrote this about the Bundys because she says that they're the same story. It's two different sides of the same story that was created by America and its deep-rooted cultural conflicts. And Keeler later on, if you look at this next slide here, you'll notice that somebody posted about how Ammon Bundy was now appearing to align himself with Native people that wanted to get rid of treaty rights. And then there's a link to an article in the Flathead Beacon titled Controversial New Code of the West Conference. And it says a controversial new code of the West Conference in Whitefish, Montana is featuring a slate of speaker that includes Ammon Bundy, who made national headlines during the standoff with federal law enforcement. And it's Jacqueline Keeler, the very author of the book about the standoff with Standing Rock, comparing it to the standoff with the Bundys, says in the comments as she posts this article, and the Bundys wanted to come to Standing Rock? Hashtag true colors, I suppose, like Zinke. They think the tribes would rather be corporations than sovereign nations. Well, Miss Keeler compared the two standoffs as
book.
if they were similar to each other. And then she says that the Bundys wanted to come to Standing Rock when, in fact, members of the Bundys did go to Standing Rock. Mm-hmm. We know for a fact because we saw them.
Yep.
But I also want to show you that there has been a very clear and long history of deep-rooted racism, of alt-right, neo-fascist, straight-up hatred of black people racism. And this is illustrated very well in this speech given by Ammon Bundy back in 2014. This was right after the standoff, right after they got off of the refuge.
All right.
And he says, I want to tell you one more thing I know about the Negro. Mr. Bundy recalled that he had driven past a public housing project in North Las Vegas, and he said, and in front of that government house, the door was usually open and the other people and the kids, and there's always at least a half a dozen people sitting on the porch, they didn't have nothing to do. They didn't have nothing for their kids to do. They didn't have nothing for their young girls to do. And because they're basically on the government subsidy, so now what do they do? He asked. They abort their young children. They put their young men in jail because they never learned how to pick cotton. And I've often wondered, are they better off as slaves, picking cotton and having a family life and doing things? Or are they better off under government subsidy? They didn't get no more freedoms. They got less freedom. But this is Ammon Bundy after the welfare rancher, as he is referred to on that comment, because he was using federal lands for grazing his cattle
Yep.
and not paying his fair share for the use of those grazing lands, is talking about how black people were better off enslaved
Yep.
because they weren't getting government handouts or support. What?
Yep. And he's talking about picking cotton. They're in Nevada. I didn't know they grew cotton in Nevada.
He's obviously not a very intelligent racist, but he is very clearly a racist.
Definitely.
Very clearly from his words. And you remember Roger Stone asked for a pardon for all of them and
That's
got
right.
it from
Yep.
Trump. And Roger Stone is also a rabid racist. Let's not forget, this is the same Roger Stone that used to advertise in the back pages for people who were willing, he sought black men to have sex with the white women that he was with so he could watch.
Wow.
I don't know what you call that, but it sounds racist
Oh, yeah.
to me. It sounds like some kind of malady, mental malady that he developed because of his deep-rooted racism. You can look that up on your own. But here's some of the other things that Roger is known for saying. He's known for calling Roland Martin a stupid Negro and a fat Negro. Republican and COVID casualty Herman Cain Mandingo. Representative Allen West, a Republican from Florida, an arrogant know-it-all Negro. He called Al Sharpton a professional Negro who likes fried chicken.
Jeez.
And he called Ben Carson an Uncle Tom.
Wow.
And a lot of those are Republicans.
Boy.
But he can't stand black people. He can't stand them. They struggle to hide their deep-seated hatred for these folks. And I want to remind you that he also became a Proud Boy. I showed you that he hung out with the Proud Boys. He was close friends with Gavin McInnes, the founder of the Proud Boys. In my past shows, I've showed you the connections to all those people. And I told you that the person that Roger Stone was usually guarded by was Enrique Terrio of the Proud Boys, but that he had been arrested on January 5th, going into D.C. because of an outstanding warrant. But also he had some magazines on him of weapons.
That's right.
So he was unavailable. And the Oath Keepers, according to Roger Stone and the Oath Keepers lawyer, they used Oath Keepers to guard Roger Stone, from what I'm not sure. But after he got out on January 5th, he was released, okay? He was ordered to leave Washington, D.C. and not return, which he did. But upon his release, he immediately met with Stuart Rhodes and some other people, some other leaders of the Oath Keepers in a parking garage. And this would have been right before he was forced to leave Washington, D.C., which was one of the conditions of Terrio's release from prison. I want you to take a look at a picture of some of the people that he gathered up with, which include, of course, Enrique Terrio. He's labeled there all the way to the right of the screen. And next to him is the Oath Keepers lawyer, Kaylin Crump. Kaylin Crump Skrelia. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. She's the lawyer for the Oath Keepers. The face that you can see facing toward the camera is that of Bianca Gracia for Latinos for Trump, which we saw hanging out with Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers quite a bit during the whole January 6th insurrection stuff. And of course, next to her is Stuart Rhodes. His back is turned to the camera. He's in the puffy jacket with the cowboy hat on, Elmer Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers. And next to him, there's a person that's blurred out. I don't know who that is. But next to that person is Joshua Macias of the Vets for Trump. So all these folks, they got together in Washington, D.C., You remember, Enrique Tarrio was not part of the insurrection because he was forced to leave D.C. But I want to remind you folks that Roger Stone was a Proud Boy himself. He is part of the militia, whether honorary or not. Here's another screen capture of him taking the Proud Boy pledge back in 2017. It's a video. The sound quality is pretty bad because he's in the middle of a party, but you can hear still him clearly say, "I am a Western chauvinist. I refuse to apologize for creating the modern world."
Wow.
I don't even know what that means. But Enrique Tarrio has a history that goes way back long before he became the leader of the Proud Boys. He wasn't originally the leader of the Proud Boys. He didn't even take over until 2018. Let me show you in this tweet. I talked about how before Enrique took over the leadership of the Proud Boys in late 2018, the organization itself was considered a joke organization that was openly mocked on YouTube. They were used to stage what Roger Stone called political theater.
Okay.
That's what they were for. They were like a group of thespians.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they became part of, where they were going to perform political theater, was the Unite the Right rally.
Okay, yeah.
Which completely got spun on its head when Heather Heyer was killed. So that did not go as predicted or as maybe they had hoped, because somebody ended up dead. You'll remember in my last show I told you that upon advice of counsel, Gavin McGinnis left the leadership of the Proud Boys, and he also distanced himself from Richard Spencer, the openly racist neo-fascist that was one of the lead organizers of the Unite the Right rally, along with other people, which include the following. And this will not be a surprise to anybody, but here, this goes way back to the beginning of when these folks began to coalesce together.
Okay.
You may recall that there was a protest at a university, I think it was in California, where Milo Yiannopoulos was speaking at the university. Well, anyway, in 2017, Enrique Tarrio, who used to be a poultry farmer, met Milo Yiannopoulos at the Unite the Right rally. And that's where they kind of both, started to work together. And he became a more active member of the Proud Boys, a leader with the Proud Boys. If you remember, I told you that when the Proud Boys announced their club, their chauvinist male gang club,
Yeah.
they did so in a publication that was edited by Richard Spencer. And all of these people coalesced together at the Unite the Right rally, which you remember President Trump called the people on both sides very good people.
Yeah.
After the death of Heather Heyer and what happened there. Maybe it wasn't because he actually thought that what happened at that event was good for anybody, but rather that his known support for and affiliation to the people in the leadership of these groups, which goes back to his campaign manager, assistant, and longtime friend Roger Stone, run real, real deep. And they have for a long time. So Enrique, the Unite the Right rally, where Enrique and Milo met, and Richard Spencer was, and all of that, had a lot of racists, Klansmen,
Yeah.
militias, 3%ers. In fact, according to the Charlottesville Police Department, an affidavit was put out by the Charlottesville Police Department before the rally, and the planned attendees included the Klan, the militia movement, a right-wing movement that gained traction in the 1990s, whose members include activists who took over the Federal Reserve. The Bundys? Yes.
Yep.
The Bundys were involved. The 3%ers were involved. The Alt-Knights, an alt-right fight club, and others. 150 plus Alt-Knights, 200 to 500 Klansmen, 500 plus 3%ers, and 200 to 300 militia members from people like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. There they all converged.
Yep.
And let me show you how this was viewed even by the Bernie Sanders followers. The Anarchists for Bernie Sanders posted on social media, on Facebook, how the Bundys had gotten acquitted, yet the state was using LRADs and live weapons at Standing Rock. Because they did. But you have to remember that Bernie Sanders and the many groups affiliated with Bernie Sanders, defending Bernie Sanders, campaigning for Bernie Sanders, were later working directly with Trump and his campaign and Milo Yiannopoulos. People like Cassandra Fairbanks, who was working with members of the group People for Bernie Sanders and was literally working together with Winnie Wong and other high-level people in the Bernie's campaign to get the vote out for Bernie, and then was working for Sputnik and other publications on the alt-right, closely working with Roger Stone and Steve Bannon. And it seemed to me there was definitely some infiltration on the part of Roger Stone and his people doing political theater, not just at Standing Rock, but in many other places. So I want you to hear how there are many members of Congress who still need to be questioned by the Select Committee. I previously told you that Kelly Armstrong, the Republican representative for North Dakota, had mentioned being on a call with Kevin McCarthy, where Kevin McCarthy admitted, where Kevin McCarthy stated to the press later that Trump had taken responsibility for the insurrection. Here is an interview that was played on the David Pakman show where you can hear McCarthy admit just that. Listen for yourselves.
I say he has responsibility. He told me personally that he does have some responsibility. I think a lot of people do. But what I proposed, which I think history will say I'm right, because it's the right thing to do, I believe, have a bipartisan commission and get all your facts. Actually work through the grand jury to find out at the end instead of predetermining whether someone's guilty or not.
Instead of predetermining, nobody's predetermined anything.
He's one saying that.
But
Trump admitted some responsibility, and he said it right there.
Of course he admitted that. He's been trying to walk it back ever since, and he has said, since he spoke on the floor, and he said this in this recording you just listened to, that Trump had responsibility, but a lot of people had responsibility. While that may be true, I think what he's insinuating was that Nancy Pelosi had some responsibility, that Democrats had some responsibility for Republican mob people, MAGAs, trying to kill them. Well, I want to play for you, once again, Kelly Armstrong's corroboration that he was on that phone call, and yes, he heard Trump admit responsibility for the insurrection. Here it is once again.
Sean, welcome back to Point of View. I know you're extremely busy, so thank you so much for giving us and the people of North Dakota some of your time. I want to start here. Yesterday, it was being reported that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy was on a phone call with GOP colleagues of yours. I don't know if you're on that call or not, and said that, hey, he spoke with President Trump, and President Trump did take some responsibility for what happened at the Capitol. Were you on that call with House Minority Leader McCarthy, and did he say that?
I was, and I mean, those calls are supposed to be off the record and private because that's how we work on how we go forward. But it's been reported everywhere, so I think at this point it's fair to say, yes, he did say that.
Did he say when he spoke to President Trump and when he said that or anything, or any more details you can give us?
No, I don't. And to be clear, I was in the parking lot at the Bismarck Airport trying to wait as long as possible to board a plane, actually when that part of the conversation was going on.
It's very interesting the more I hear it, because he says, well, I'll admit that, yes, that's true because you've already heard about it, but
Yeah.
it's been reported and everybody already knows because McCarthy opened his mouth. Normally we keep this confidential, but yes, I heard it. And he said, normally we keep these things confidential because that's how we move forward.
Yep.
Forward from what? Forward from a coup attempt that a lot of Republicans were in on, including Mike Pence? Is that what you're talking about? Because it sounds like that's what you're talking about, and it looks increasingly like that's exactly what Kelly Armstrong was talking about. Moving forward from the insurrection. Let me show you more evidence of what they're talking about here. The January 6th committee sent a letter to Ivanka, and I remind you that it's getting closer and closer now to the orbit of the president himself, the former president, and his family. And in it, they say that there is a letter, this is from the letter to Sean Hannity. And in the letter to Sean Hannity, the letter includes additional evidence that is already in the committee's possession, where it appears that White House counsel, I don't know who, what lawyer in the White House counsel, but someone objected to Trump pressuring Pence. Especially, they focused on Hannity's text to Mark Meadows on the evening of January 5th. This is when the heat was on Mike Pence at its red hot, right? And it says, the select committee says to Sean Hannity, we are in possession of dozens of text messages that you sent to and received from former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. And he says that we specifically were focused on a series of communications with President Trump, with White House staff, and President Trump's legal team between December 31st and January 20th. And he says, for example, on December 31st, you texted to Mark Meadows, we cannot lose the entire White House counsel office. I do not see January 6th happening the way he is being told, he being Donald Trump. After the 6th, he should announce he will lead the nationwide effort to reform voting integrity. And I think that's it, isn't it? Yeah. So it goes on, but the point here is the part where he says, we cannot lose all of the White House counsel.
Yeah.
Why would he text that? Well, we've learned since that they were all going to quit.
Yep.
Because he was going to do something. Well, he was going to force them to sign letters, to send letters to the different states, which they had already drafted, that said, you need to have a different slate of electors, and you need to investigate irregularities in your elections because we have found irregularities, even though they hadn't found any irregularities. You're just going to basically lie in a document, signed it, have someone in the Department of Justice sign it, and no one would sign it. Everybody refused, and in a sign of solidarity, they all said they would quit. All of them said they would quit if Trump went forward and decided to go ahead and do this. Remember Jeffrey Clark? Remember that Jeffrey Clark is not willing to testify?
Yeah.
That's what they want to talk to him about because he was willing to sign the letters. He was willing to do it. And another key part of this is the exchange between the Department of Justice, a federal judge, and Department of Justice's James Pierce. And again, there is the tip of a hat here to the Empty Wheel account that follows all these legal cases because she's been emphasizing this specific part of the law, the specific exchange where the Justice Department's Judge James Pierce said the following. If you look at the next slide, in the Politico article where this came from, it gives you the quote that Pierce quickly added that it might well be a crime, what they did with the memo and trying to pressure Pence, if the person, meaning the lawyer speaking about this, because we have Eastman, Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, and other Rudy Giuliani all telling the president, then President Trump, this is legal, this is what you can do, and this is how you can do it, right? So this is what this judge is talking about. He says, if the person reaching out to Pence knew the vice president had an obligation under the Constitution to recognize the results, in other words, to certify the electors, and they told him to not do that, they told him to do otherwise, knowing that it was a crime to do otherwise, that in itself is a crime for the lawyers giving that advice. It goes on and it quotes, if that person, lawyer, does that knowing that it is not an available argument and is asking the vice president to do something that that individual, lawyer, knows is wrongful, meaning illegal, one of the definitions of corruptly is trying to get someone to violate a legal duty. So, falling under corruption, the lawyers would be charged for a crime because they tried to get someone else to violate the law, in this case, the Vice President of the United States, then Vice President Mike Pence. Knowing that this remedy that they're offering, which is he does not certify the electors, was not actually an available route for him to take. And in these posts analyzing the the different avenues taken by these fake electors and their fraudulent ascertainments that they sent to the National Archives is, of course, the records from the National Archives. Because, as you all know, President Trump had asked for the Supreme Court to keep those records secret because of his executive privilege, a case he lost 8-1 several days ago. And now we know that the National Archives, thanks to the Supreme Court, has given already, as of today, thousands of documents over to the Select Committee. And this will shed significant light on what the White House counsel lawyers told Donald Trump and Meadows. So that part about who those individuals are, who those lawyers are that might have committed a crime when they told Trump and or Pence that he could do these things that legally he could not do. We could find out very soon because it would be part of the records that are in the National Archives that Trump was trying to suppress. Furthermore, we could find out more details of what exactly they said to Pence and Trump. And there's more. Because in the letter to Ivanka, we find out that the Select Committee wants to talk to her about what she heard between Trump and Pence on the morning of January 6th. Okay? And they specifically want to ask her about the conclusion of the conversations where Trump directed, in other words, ordered, pressured Vice President Pence to violate the Constitution, which would be illegal. And what she heard, White House counsel, because she was in the room, when the White House lawyers were saying whatever that is that they said that could be construed as criminal if they gave advice that was not in accordance to the law. That's forthcoming. Very soon we shall know. We also found out from Miss Grisham, who worked for Melania, specifically Melania. The Guardian published that Grisham, who met with the select committee, told them that the mystery that we have around the Trump promise to, we're going to march down to the Capitol, the speech he gave at the Ellipse, that the question remained as to whether or not he was going to go.
Yep.
What did he really mean to go? Was that a lie? Was that a false promise? What was it? Well, she said there's a line by line, and I'll tell you what that is in just a moment, where you will be able to find out. That's also part of the National Archive records we are waiting to hear about, that we hope are now in the hands of the Select Committee. But here's more. The Guardian article also sheds light on others who may be called to speak to the Select Committee,
Really?
including the Home Usher, the Chief Usher of the White House, then Tim Harleth. And Harleth used to be the director of rooms for Trump International Hotel.
Okay.
So he was very close to the Trump family. They took him from the Trump hotels to the White House with them in 2017. He was one of their most trusted employees. We've now learned that Grisham in this article talks about how Trump was holding these secret meetings at the residence, not in the Oval, not in the offices. And one of the people that would have been privy to who attended these secret meetings with the president was Mr. Harleth.
Okay.
And so it goes on to say that after Trump lost and Mr. Harleth tried to ingratiate himself to the Biden transition team, they fired him.
Okay.
They got rid of him. And we knew that they got rid of him because on the day of the inauguration, Biden and Jill went to the door and nobody opened the door for them because there was no White House usher to open the door because he had been fired. But we never dreamed that part of the reason why he might have been fired, even though he was such a close confidant of the Trump family, was because he knows too much. Because he knows too much about those secret meetings. And he may be called to speak about them.
Wow.
And there's more. Because about that promise to go marching all the way to the Capitol with them,
Yep.
we now know that Trump obviously never went to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Instead, he went back to the White House and he watched everything on TV after he was supposedly informed by the Secret Service that it would be too dangerous for him to march to the Capitol, that they could not guarantee his security in order. But the Select Committee is now trying to find out whether Trump made a promise, that speech, because even though he had no intention of going, because he had already been told by the Secret Service that it would be too dangerous for him, that he went ahead and still say, I'm coming with you, I'm going to go march down there with you, because he hoped that those words would incite the insurrection that he needed to stop the certification, which was the only play he had left. And if you'll put it back on that graphic so I can finish reading what it says about this, it says that Grisham told the Select Committee that Trump's intentions and whether the Secret Service had told Trump that he couldn't march or that he could march because it was too dangerous, all of that will be in the line by line, which is a document that outlines the president's every move, moment by moment, and would for that particular day. So,
Wow.
all of these documents that heretofore had not been available for a variety of reasons, including the appeals by then President Donald Trump to the Supreme Court and the many exhortations to executive privilege that have been made by President, by Kelly McEnany, by Mark Meadows, by Jeffrey Clark, by blah, 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 blah. That's done. That's over with. All those people claiming that they had executive privilege, the SCOTUS decision against Trump basically killed all of their claims along with it. And I want you to also focus on some of the other people that are being looked at, which includes Sean Hannity, but also Kelly McEnany, because the letter to Hannity includes the requests and text messages between the two of them where they outline a plan following the insurrection on what they're going to do. Looks like the puppet masters over at Fox News were really controlling the White House.
Exactly.
And they told Trump, or Hannity told McEnany to tell Trump,
I see.
no more talking about the stolen election. That's number one. Number two, impeachment and the 25th Amendment are real, and many people in the administration will quit because of what he did. And Kelly McEnany responds with, love it, thank you, this is the playbook. She's 100% behind it going forward. We're going to do this. We're going to get him off of the... But there's more. I want to show you more of the text from January 7th where she says she's going to help to reinforce. This is the playbook. She says, love that. Thank you, Hannity. It's the playbook. I will help reinforce it. McEnany also agreed with Hannity's text specifically recommending that the White House staff should make an effort to keep Trump away from certain people. Sean Hannity, quote, key now, no more crazy people. Okay? And Kayleigh McEnany responds, yes, 100%. A few days later, on January 10, 2021, Hannity wrote White House Chief of Staff and Congressman Jim Jordan, and he wrote both of them the following message. Guys, we have a clear path to land the plane in 9 days. He cannot mention the election again. Ever. I did not have a good call with him today. And worse, I'm not sure what's left to do or say. And I don't like knowing if it's truly understood. Ideas? So,
wow.
He not only was like, okay, before the insurrection, I don't know if things are going to work out the way he thinks they're going to work out. But even after, they're like, he screwed the pooch. Don't let him ever talk about this again. And don't let the crazy people near him. Who are the crazy people?
Mike Lindell, Rudy Giuliani.
The irony here, Duke, is you don't know for sure. There are so many crazy people.
That's
you
true.
cannot tell me for sure what crazy people they're referring to.
That's right.
You can't.
That's true.
I mean, you can guess. Yes, Rudy Giuliani is crazy. So is Mike Lindell. So is Sidney Powell. Mm-hmm. So is Paxton. So is Pierce. Yep. So is Eastman. The list goes on. How sane is Kelly McEnany? How sane are the people that were in his administration, including Mark Meadows, including what's his name that was on Ari's The Beat?
Oh yeah,
Navarro, Pete Navarro. Those people sound cuckoo to me. Well, let's take a look at breaking news, because you will not believe what they've uncovered amongst the documents that are coming out. Yeah. All of this stuff is coming out.
Yep.
Guess what, folks? There was a draft document, executive order, that Trump was going to sign, in which, and this is true, it's bonkers, but it's true, they were going to supposedly collect all of the Dominion voting machines.
Seize them.
They were going to seize, collect, retain, and analyze all machines, equipment, electronically stored information, and material records required for retention under a U.S. law that relates to the preservation of election records. It also cites a lawsuit that they filed against Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. Additionally, the draft order would have given the defense secretary 60 days to write an assessment of the 2020 election. And it suggests it could have been a gambit to keep Trump in power until at least mid-February of 2021. It opens, this executive order, it opens by citing a host of presidential authorities that permit the steps that Trump would take, including the Constitution, Executive Order 12333, and well-known order that governs intelligence communities. But this draft executive order also cites two classified documents: National Security Presidential Memorandum 13 and 21. And the existence of the first of those memoranda is already public information, but the existence of the second memoranda that is listed in this executive order was not previously known. NSPM 13 governs the Pentagon's offensive cyber operations. And according to a person with knowledge of the memoranda in question, 21 makes small adjustments to 13, and the two documents are viewed within the executive branch as a pair. They go together.
I see.
About cybersecurity. The fact that the draft executive order that Trump never signed gives orders. The executive order's author knew about the existence of Memoranda 21. It suggests that they had access to information about sensitive government secrets for them to even include that. The draft order also greenlit the appointment of a special counsel to oversee the operation and institute all criminal and civil proceedings as appropriate, based on the evidence collected, and provided all resources necessary to carry out their duties consistent with federal laws and the Constitution. The draft order cites the forensic report of Antrim County's Michigan's voting machine. Remember the report that was produced by Russ Ramsland that confused Minnesota counties for counties in Michigan?
Yep, I remember that.
Right? Yeah, they cited that as part of their proof in this executive order.
Wow.
It is such a Mickey Mouse order. You looked at it.
Yeah.
You peeked at it. It's full of lies, you said.
Exactly.
Like,
First thing I thought.
it's full of debunked lies and conspiracy theories. But it is so terrible that Lisa Goyton, the co-director of the Liberty and National Security Program of the nonprofit group Brennan Center for Justice, had the following to say about it. This draft order represents not only an abuse of emergency powers, but a total misunderstanding of them. The order doesn't even make the basic findings of an unusual and extraordinary threat that would be necessary to trigger any action under federal emergency powers. It's the legal equivalent of a kid scrawling on the wall with crayons.
Wow.
And also, I want to share with you other documents that were attached. There's a document labeled Remarks on National Healing, also now in the select panel's hands, which illustrates its own alternative path that was never taken by Trump in the aftermath of the attacks. Its tone stands in jarring contrast to what Trump actually said at the time and continues to say. Here's what it said. Imagine if he had said these things, okay? Here's the draft document that was supposed to be Remarks on National Healing for how to move forward after the insurrection. Maybe this is what Kelly Armstrong was referring to, how we move forward.
Yeah.
It said, I would like to begin today by addressing the heinous attack that took place yesterday at the Capitol. Like all Americans, I was outraged and sickened by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. Of course, we know that he did not immediately deploy the National Guard. And not only was that false, but the January 6th Select Committee sent a letter Thursday saying that the Trump's defense secretary at the time, Chris Miller, has testified under oath that the president never contacted him at any time on January 6th and never at any time had issued any order to deploy the National Guard.
Wow.
So we know that that is a complete lie.
Yep.
But that this document called National Healing continues sharply criticizing the attack on January 6th. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. I am directing the Department of Justice to ensure all lawbreakers are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The document follows with a direct communication to the rioters, and he says to them, we must send a message, not with mercy, but with justice. To those who engaged in acts of violence and destruction, I want to be very clear. You do not represent me. You do not represent our movement, and you do not represent our country. And if you broke the law, you belong in jail. Now, imagine if Trump had delivered that instead of what he's done. As we know, he said, we have to have peace, so go home. We love you. You're very special. We've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. And also, of course, he praised one of the insurrectionists that got shot, wished her a happy birthday, and has made her a martyr out of her. So the documents that we are hearing that are being released are showing us that Trump departed, in a very, very stark way from what there was, advised for him to do following the insurrection, and that he continues to, diverge from what was told to him that he should do. In fact, in closing, this is what he said about, healing and reconciliation. He said, the pandemic isolated millions in their homes, damaged the economy, and claimed countless victims. Ending the pandemic and rebuilding the economy will require all of us working together, along with renewed emphasis on patriotism, faith, and community. We must renew the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that bind us together as a national family. That never happened. Sadly, that never happened. It could have.
Yep.
Of course, now we know he wants to take credit for the vaccines, but he's a day late and $1 short because nobody wants to hear about it. Everybody wants to boo him because of what he said, because of what he's continued to say, which is that he won the 2020 election with zero evidence. And there will be more and more evidence coming out in this select committee from the National Archives, and we will be following all of it here on A Mexican Crossing Lines, so stay tuned for future releases of information. Thanks for being with us to talk about the friends in low places that Trump employed for his coup on January 6th. You've been listening to 88.1 FM, KPPPLP Fargo-Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And I'm Duke Gomez-Schempp.
Good evening and God bless.